Last Sunday we mentioned to the congregation that the present and future of the church depends upon men who are willing to step into leadership roles and fulfill both the role and function of an elder and deacons, by the way. I may have said just elder the other night, but deacons as well, who serve in those particular capacities. And I mentioned to you that really a congregation should never stop evaluating and looking. Sometimes we almost think about it as something you do every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. But really, a congregation should never stop evaluating and determining who might be able to lead and encourage and fulfill the roles and purposes. But when I mentioned it last Sunday, I was asked, well, are you going to spend some time talking about the qualifications and things? About a couple years ago, I did a series with you, very detailed. I took small portions of these texts and spent a lot of time in small segments over the period, I think, of about 5 or 6 different lessons. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm giving you the summation in this study, but that's going to require you to bear with me a little bit today as we move a little faster, but I do want to remind you of them. So this lesson is not necessarily intended to be the most detailed. We did that a while back and have done that even prior to that, but this is a reminder lesson. Just to think about who are we looking for? What role will they fulfill? What qualifications do they need to have? Now, you just read in your hearing from Randy there, 1 Timothy chapter 3. Let me read to you Titus chapter 1, and we will have read these 2 texts then, and then I'll reference them, but I won't keep reading them throughout our study this morning. Let's look at Titus 1, verse 5. For this reason I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are lacking, and appoint elders in every city as I commanded you. If a man is blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of dissipation or insubordination, for a bishop must be blameless as a steward of God, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but hospitable, a lover of what is good, sober-minded, just and holy, and self-controlled, holding fast to the faithful word as he has been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and convict those who contradict. For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole households, teaching things which they ought not for the sake of dishonest gain. One of them, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. Therefore rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn from the truth. To the pure, all things are pure, but to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure, but even their mind and conscience are defiled. They profess to know God, but in works they deny Him, being abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work. Now, certainly at the end of that text, that's the kind of individual that elders might have to address sometimes, and the difficulties and problems that those individuals might bring in to a particular congregation. Those won't really be our conversation so much this morning as we just kind of look at these 2 narratives now. And I'll remind you of what verses these references are on the screen, but I just want to walk through them with you and get you to think about them. And then in our mind's eye, as it relates to a congregation, then we need to be thinking about what men fit this description, who might want to serve in these capacities and fit these descriptions. We traditionally, I'll side note already, and I haven't even started, but I'm already on my side note. But I want us to think about the fact qualifications is our word, right? I didn't see that in either of those texts. These are the qualifications of an elder. I don't know, correct me later if I'm wrong on that, but I don't recall that being in either one of those texts. It's a description of somebody. It's not, here's the qualifications, get your checkbox out, and let's mark them all off. This is a picture. This is who you're looking for. This is the man that you're looking for that can serve. Because here's the problem sometimes with the checkbox qualification kind of language. we start looking for perfect people and we never find anybody. We're trying to find perfection rather than qualified. We're looking for somebody who's never stumbled in any of these things that are described here, rather than a man who recognizes maybe at times his own weakness, but is working to live according to this description here. This is a picture. This is what you're going to look for, Timothy. Remember, that's who he's talking to as well. He's telling this young preacher, Timothy, when you go into these towns and you present the gospel and you're trying to strengthen these local churches, you need to appoint men, and here's what you're looking for. Titus, when you go into all these different cities and you need to help those congregations establish leadership among you, here's who you're looking for. This is the kind of individual that you're trying to find. In the very first verse of chapter 3 of 1 Timothy, he said, if a man desire the office, he desireth a good work. We have viewed that as a qualification. I don't know. I don't know that it fits the exact same things that are going to be described here. I mean, obviously, a man shouldn't do the work against his will, right? That's an obvious conclusion that we should make. But I think this is supposed to be thought of as an encouraging statement, right? Paul tells Timothy this is an encouraging statement. If a man desires to do this, he desires a good thing. This is an important thing, Timothy. When you go into these churches and you're seeking men to serve as elders, then encourage them to realize that if they'll accept this responsibility, they're accepting a good thing, a good work. Something important to these congregations. Sometimes we look at that verse and we go, oh, well, this guy, he doesn't want it, he doesn't want it, he doesn't want it. When maybe we should be asking more or talking more favorably of the work to encourage people to want to do it, to desire to do that. And certainly it comes with its challenges, but I believe it's more of a statement of fact than it is a qualification, if you will. It's just a fact. If a man desires the office of a bishop or desires the office of an elder, he desires a good work. It's a statement of fact. And certainly from a practical standpoint, one shouldn't be appointed against their will. In fact, I don't even know how that would work. But yet, keep it positive is all I'm trying to say. When you have conversations about the eldership, it is very tempting to talk about how hard the work is and how difficult it is, and the problems that arise, and the things you have to deal with. And all of that is true. All of that is true. But if that's all we focus on, it's hard to get anybody to recognize it's a good work. It's a desirable work. One that will benefit and help a congregation as God would see it. And then you start moving into certain types of qualifications. The first I want to look at with you is what we might simply call as family qualifications. It's said both in 1 Timothy 3 verse 2, Titus 1 verse 6 as well, that he should be the husband of one wife. That is challenged, by the way, a lot of folks in modern times as to exactly what's that reference, because we would just assume that polygamy would be contrary no matter what, right? And so a man really, no man should have a plurality of wives, and so it's hard for us to maybe hone in on exactly what does he mean. Because if it is about that, wouldn't that be the case for every Christian? Every man should only have one wife, right? Yet that description again fits other folks. Maybe in that culture and in modern culture with divorce commonplace, it's possible that the elder should not be married to one while bound to another, right? Jesus spent a lot of time talking about that, about the problem where covenant issues are, right? Where adultery really resides in that covenant conversation. And it's very quite possible that we're still addressing some of that among congregations where you're trying to figure out some of those things. Maybe, but again, that's a definition that would fit everybody. Everybody would fall under Matthew 19. Everybody would fall under those. So don't know whether that's per se what Paul was trying to get Timothy to see here. Polygamy doesn't seem to fit. it seems that those issues are addressed among all Christians. But maybe a better understanding, if we think about this as a picture, maybe better is this is an effort to tie him to these other qualifications that are about to come. These other descriptions that are about to come about his family, this is the beginning point of that conversation. That he's the husband of one wife. Here's this family entity that begins to grow and crop out. And then what's this family look like? It starts with a husband and a wife. And the Lord is wise enough to know that no elder is ever going to be able to serve in that capacity without the strength and encouragement of a loving wife. The wisdom of God is coming forth in this description. And this effort to understand how his family should look. He said in verse 4 then of 1 Timothy 3 that he rules well his own house. So here's this couple, and here are these children, and you see the evidence of how he's able to guide and lead them. You can see how he conducts himself in his own household, and it gives you a picture as to how he will function in God's household, right? That's the point of the quality. We get caught, and I'm not saying it's unimportant conversations, by the way. I understand there have been a lot of discussions about does children mean one or does it mean more than one? I get all that. But let's not get lost in those difficult kinds of things and forget what Paul's trying to get Timothy to do here. He's trying to get Timothy to find men who fit a description. And the description is a man who's married, has his one wife, and there are children in that household, and he's governing and leading and keeping that household in a manner that evidences he could do the same among God's household. Right? That's what you're looking for, Timothy. Because that's at the core of what's happening here. Here are these children that are in subjection, honoring the family order of God, respecting that order. There's gravity here as it relates to that. Again, if the children are unruly, if the children have no will whatsoever to listen and be guided by that husband and wife inside that household, then it's going to be a problem for that elder to serve among God's family. It's evidence, if you will, to his ability to lead the house of God. That's what you're looking for, Timothy and Titus. That's what you're trying to find as it relates to that. Titus adds a little more to that. In verse 6 of Titus chapter 1, he says that he needs to have believing, or some might say faithful, children. I'm always cautious in this area because I know there's about 2 billion variations of various things that come up in relationship to this conversation. I've always argued, quick answer by the way, I've always argued that the word children has to be able to apply to one. And the reason I say that is if somebody asks, if there's a person that has one child and you ask that person, how many children do you have? They don't say, I don't have any. I don't have children. I have child. Right? If somebody asks the question, do you have any children? And you had one, you'd say, yes. Yes, I have one. Right? But that's me, by the way. That's me. That's my understanding of that word. It may mean something different to you. And maybe in your mind it means multiple. And that's okay. But here's my point, though, is we spend a lot of time sometimes working on that, and we forget there's a reason he said this. And it wasn't to cause a debate in 2024 over whether children meant one or more than one. It's to tell us that here's a man who needs to have faithful, believing children that will help evidence that father is guiding that household in such a way that he can lead the house of God. Right? That's at the core of this. And again, I think sometimes we get that qualification mindset going, and we try to get all these intricate check-the-box details, and we miss the picture. He needs to have believing, faithful children. I mean, there's lots of other discussions we could have. Don't have time for it all this morning. But believing in whom, right? Believing in God, we quickly would say. Faithful to whom? Maybe the evidence is faithful to the father in the household. They're in subjection and subordinate to the father and how they're faithful. He's a man who's evidence that he can guide his children and keep them faithful. He can also do the same in the house of God. That's the picture. So these children aren't accused of riot or unruly, right? They don't fit that description. They're faithful to that potential elder. They're faithful to God. They're believers in the gospel. All of the above, right? That's what you're looking for. You're looking for a man, married, family, and that family behaves in a way that will allow that man to have the right kind of influence within a congregation of people. That's the picture that we're looking for. It would certainly be a challenge for an elder to lead others to submission to God if his own children refused, right? It'd be awful hard for him to fulfill that role among a congregation, within a community, if his own children refused to do the same. That's why these family qualifications, I believe, are given to us. Now, we mentioned this briefly before. The text doesn't specifically say how many children. And by the way, I refer to that meaning how many of them have to be faithful. That's always a question that comes up. If he's got 3 and 2 are and 1 isn't, and what? Quite frankly, folks, I think in those moments you're going to have to look at the man and the situation he's in and make a decision. If you're looking for a perfect example in the text of God's Word that tells you exactly how to answer that question, if you can find it, then share it with me. I'd love to have it. I don't have it. I don't have a verse that helps me clarify whether if he's got 3, if 2 are and 1 isn't, and all those kinds of things we have. That's why I say you got to look at the picture, right? Look at them. Did he guide them well? Did he rule his own house? Were they subject to him while they were under his rule? Did he lead them in the gospel? Right? We can use reason and common sense to determine whether a man fits the description and not become consumed by trying to define things in just an exact way, and that's the only way that word or thought could be defined. The word all was not seen in the text. But nor is the word some. It just said believing children. So it didn't say all children, nor did it say some children. It just said believing children. And we're going to have to discern, does he fit the picture? And again, friends, if you're looking for perfection, Gary and I will step down at the end of services. If you're looking for perfection, we'll step down at the end of services because you won't find it. You won't find it. We're looking for the picture. We're looking for qualified. We're looking, does he fit what God has described as one who can serve? The greater question may be, is there sufficient evidence that he has ruled his own house in a way that produced believing and faithful children? Right? Isn't that really, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for. But let's talk about a few other things. Let's talk about the character. Both in 1 Timothy 3, verse 2, and Titus in verse 1, 6, he said he must be blameless, without reproach. Now notice, he didn't say sinless. I think blameless or without reproach simply means there's nothing held against him in that moment, right? In the moment he's being examined and determined whether he fits the description of one who could serve as an elder, then what you're looking for is one who doesn't have some outstanding issue in that moment that needs to be addressed. If you're talking about sinless perfection, never been blamed, right? No guilt of any kind of any time ever, that's an impossibility for anybody. So Paul's not talking about a man who's never made a mistake, never transgressed, never had a sin in his life. No, he's saying in that moment when you're is there something outstanding that needs to be addressed? Is there some problem? Is there some guilt to his charge right now that he's never done anything about, never said anything about, never addressed? That might not be the guy you want to look to, Timothy. Titus, you might want to avoid a man who's got a lot of things that he needs to get addressed first. He needs to be blameless, without reproach in that moment. Is he vigilant, circumspect, temperate? As it relates to his willingness to maintain his own character and behaviors in such a way. Let's add self-controlled to that in Titus's account. Does that mean that he's never had a moment of anger? Does that mean that he's never had a moment of frustration ever in his life that was exemplified? He's never shaken his fist at somebody on the highway. Right? He's never got upset with a telemarketer. No. When you look at the body of evidence of this man, has he shown himself to be temperate, self-controlled? Not has he ever had a moment 35 years ago when I saw him at the bank and he was upset. Right? Those are two different things. If a man has a pattern of being ill-tempered, if a man has a pattern of not maintaining self-control, that's what you're looking for. Not an instance in his life where he made a mistake. Probably something that most likely, if he's the kind of man we're describing here, he's already repented of and already tried to work on and improve. And so as you look at him, does he lash out all the time? Does he carry a chip on his shoulder? Right? That's not the guy you're looking for. You're not looking for one who acts that way. You're looking for a sober-minded man. Does that mean he never laughs? He's not permitted. Nothing's ever funny to him. No, what it means is he's able to understand the difference. Right? He's able to understand that there are things that are sober, things that are serious. And his thinking recognizes that. He's able to discern between those moments and behave in a sober-minded way when issues arrive and situations are being confronted. He thinks soberly, seriously, especially when it comes to the work and purposes of God. He's sober-minded about that. And he takes upon himself a mindset of seriousness as it relates to those things. 1 Timothy 3 verse 2 said he's got to be of good behavior. He's orderly. Right? He's one who knows how to behave himself and function in an orderly fashion. By the way, that's personally important for him because it's going to be important as he guides God's flock among him. If he is chaotic all the time in his own personal behaviors and walk, he's going to struggle keeping order among God's people. And so man probably isn't fit for the work if he's unable to function in an orderly way. And the distraction that could very easily become. His behavior is good. He's a hospitable individual. Right? And that, by the way, doesn't mean he's willing to have you sit down at his table for dinner. It's part of it, potentially part of it. But with hospitable, think about approachable, right? He's somebody you can talk to. He's somebody that will listen. He's somebody that will be hospitable to you when you're trying to address various difficulties, challenges, problems. He's not going to be perfect at that, by the way. Right? Again, we're not looking for somebody who's perfect. But on the whole, he's a hospitable individual. He's somebody that fits that description. He's well spoken of. There's a good testimony about him. And again, that doesn't mean you couldn't find somebody that could find some fault with him, right? not any of us sitting here, well, maybe I shouldn't speak on your behalf, I'd be judging you, but all of us probably could find somebody who could find something that they remember or think of that they could say against. But on the whole, here's somebody's got a good testimony about him. And people think of him and his name comes. That's how it's given. He's not given to wine or a brawler. There's going to be moments where he's got to be sober-minded. We've already seen that. He's going to be self-controlled. This would most likely put him in a circumstance where maybe that control gets left behind. And so he's governed by strictness here, that he wants to remain in that sober-minded state and in that self-controlled state, and certainly wants to avoid anything that might put him in that brawler mode. And with that, let me add that, and again, this isn't saying that he's going to be perfect and he always does it the right way, but he probably ought not be somebody that's always looking to fight, right? He's not a brawler. He's not looking for confrontation. Sometimes confrontation will come to him through false teaching, through behaviors of others. Sometimes confrontation will come to him, but his character is not looking for that. His character is not looking to be a brawler, an arguer, a fighter. He's not looking and inviting those kinds of things. He's not a striker. He's not violent. It would be contrary to that self-control. He's not greedy. He's going to have to be hospitable, generous, benevolent. But if he's doing this for selfish ambition, if he's greedy for something personal, he's going to gain out of this. If you add, and again, we don't have time to explore every text, but if you add the fact that the Scriptures indicate that elders were worthy of honor, and that word honor implies compensation. Now, Gary and I are not asking for money. My point is that was part of the description within Scripture. That elders, and then even those, now I guess maybe it sounds like I am talking about me now, but those who also minister in the gospel were worthy of double honor, the Bible says. But if they're greedy and seek, then that's going to be a problem. That's not who you're looking for. They're gentle. They're patient. Quite frankly, probably at times patient to a fault. But sometimes it's needed to be gentle and patient when situations and circumstances arise. They're not quarrelsome. They're not brawlers. They're not contentious. They're not looking to start trouble and cause trouble. They understand that the things they say and do might spark certain things. They in modern times, or you hear me say sometimes, they got to have a good filter. They got to know when things should be said and when things shouldn't be said. They need to know what might spark an argument that doesn't need to happen and what might need to be said to diffuse a contentious moment. They've got to be somebody who isn't looking or creating difficulty and challenge all the time. They're not covetous. They're not lovers of money, as we've already looked at. They're not self-willed. When they're going to lead a congregation of people, when they're going to lead God's people, they've got to be somebody who's willing to look out for the interest of the whole, right? We're not just their own personal interest, self-willed. It's my way and that's it, right? No, they're a guy that's not self-willed. They're looking out for the interest of the whole. They're not quick-tempered or soon angry, which we've already discussed. They love that which is good. That's what they're seeking. They love that which is good. And you see it in their behaviors and choices. They're just and fair and holy men. Men who sanctify themselves in their relationship with God and appreciate the serious nature of that relationship. And finally, let me wrap up with you this morning. That ultimately he's got to have the ability to lead. You've heard me say this before, and I did more detail of this a couple years ago. He could fit all of those things that we just talked about, but still not be able to lead. Those are character issues and family qualifications and things of that sort. There might be men who fit all of that, but not necessarily able to lead because maybe they are challenged when it comes to apt to teach. Right? They got the right character, but are they willing to step in and instruct and guide and teach, as we see in verse 2 of 1 Timothy chapter 3. It's that word that comes didactic, which means instructive, right? They're willing to teach, instruct, and guide from that sense. They have to be men ready to hold fast the faithful word. They can be a good man, fit those characteristic qualifications, but are they willing to take and faithfully the Word of God and use it as God would intend? Are they going to be able to address falsehoods when they come up? Are they going to be able to take the testimony of God's Word and apply it to a controversy or a circumstance or a false teaching that arrives? And so because of that, they're not going to be a novice. Not going to be somebody who's new to all this, but somebody who's ready to step in and lead a congregation. Well, that's the fast version, isn't it? I know. Anytime you preach a summary lesson, I promise you that you've got more questions than I answered this morning. I know that's how it typically goes, but I just needed to get these things back into your mind. We asked the congregation last Sunday to start considering and thinking about men who could serve in these capacities, and in fairness, we needed to at least refresh our minds about who we're looking for. What are we looking for? And are there men ready to do that? And the final thing I want to put back into your minds is the first thing we put in your mind this morning, and that is that if a man desire the office of a bishop, an elder, he desires a good work. And it's an important work that the Lord's church right here in this place has been blessed with for many a year. And will need men to start soberly thinking about our present and future when it comes to that. And this was an important reminder for us this morning. And thank you for the few extra minutes that I took from you today to get through all of that material. If you're subject to the gospel in some way, are you resolved to start honoring God today? How can we help you? How can we strengthen you in some way to step into the promises of God, to appreciate salvation in Him? If you're ready to commit to that, understand what's necessary, ready to find remission of sins through baptism, if there's something we can do to pray for you this morning, some spiritual challenge that has beset you, what can we do to help you take that resolve and start following the Lord? And if you're subject in some way, won't you come as we stand and as we sing?